this is Gaurang. This week's commit is about pressure. Not the dramatic kind, but the subtle kind that shows up around boundaries. Time off, evenings, transitions, moments when things get tight. I have been thinking about how pressure doesn't really change people. It reveals what the system defaults to under stress. This one is less about calling anyone out and more about noticing patterns in teams, in leadership, and in myself. Here's the weekly commit 005, the stress test.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually when we sit down here, we're kind of gearing up to sprint through a massive topic, tech breakthroughs, history, complex economics.
We definitely bring a lot of energy.
We do. But today we're doing something a little different. We're intentionally slowing things down.
It feels appropriate, I think, given the source material we're working with today.
Definitely. We're looking at a piece from a series called The Weekly Commit. Specifically, this is entry number 005, and it's titled The Stress Test.
And the format is interesting.
Yeah, the first thing that struck me was the format. It isn't a how-to guide. It's not like a list of 10 ways to hack your productivity. It's framed as a reflective essay.
A snapshot of learning from a specific week.
Exactly. Which sets a completely different tone.
It does. It's not about giving advice. It's about observation. The author's essentially just pausing to look at a pattern of human behavior within a team and asking what is actually happening here.
And the pattern they're looking at is pressure. Specifically, how pressure functions in a workplace. There's a central thesis in this essay that I think we should put on the table right away.
Okay.
Because it really anchors everything else. The author writes, "Pressure doesn't change people. It reveals defaults."
It's a reversal of the common wisdom, isn't it? We have this whole cultural narrative that pressure is transformative.
The diamonds are made under pressure idea.
Right, or that a crisis makes you rise to the occasion. We love that hero narrative.
The idea that when the heat is on, you suddenly become a better, faster version of yourself.
But the author is arguing that's, well, a myth. When the heat turns up, you don't become someone new.
You stop pretending.
You stop pretending. The energy you are using to maintain your social mask or your professional, polite veneer, that gets diverted to just survival. So what's left?
Your default settings.
Your default settings,
Yeah.
the system's default settings.
That's a pretty sobering thought. It implies that a crisis is actually the most honest moment a team can have.
Exactly. It's a diagnostic. And the essay opens with a really specific application of this idea. The moment someone decides to quit.
Right. And it challenges the movie version of quitting. We always picture the Jerry Maguire moment, the big explosion, the shouting match, you walk out with the goldfish.
Yeah.
But the essay suggests that's rarely the reality.
The reality is much quieter. It's usually erosion, not an explosion. The author points out that people rarely leave because of one bad day.
It's a pattern.
They leave because of a pattern that repeats over time. It's a specific, quiet rhythm of boundary violations.
Erosion is the perfect word for it. It's that subtle wearing down. The source mentions a realization they had that they thought they were just dealing with proactive anxiety about work. But then they realized the anxiety wasn't about the volume of the work. It was about the nature of the requests.
And that distinction is key. You can work 80 hours a week and feel fine if the boundaries are respected, right? If the mission is clear. But you can work 40 hours and burn out completely if you feel like your time is constantly being stolen in these tiny increments.
So let's get into the mechanics of that theft. The essay breaks down this specific scenario that I think is going to be painfully familiar to a lot of our listeners. Let's call it the anatomy of the ask.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So it's a transition point. Maybe you're about to go on leave for a week. Maybe it's just 5:30 p.m. on a Friday, and you have dinner plans. You're mentally shifting gears.
Detaching from the machine.
And then the notification pings.
And it's framed as quick.
Always. Can you just finish this before you go? Can we hop on a quick call tonight? Or, if the culture's a bit more aggressive, this needs to be done. Otherwise, we're in trouble.
And this is where we enter what the source calls the gray area. And we have to be nuanced here because the author is very careful not to say that all late requests are bad.
Right. We're not saying that if the server farm is on fire, you should just ignore it because it's 5:01 p.m.
Yeah, precisely. The essay distinguishes between legitimate urgency and vague urgency. Legitimate urgency is objective.
The website is down.
The website is down. A major client is literally walking out the door. A dependency has broken. In those cases, the urgency is coming from the situation itself.
But vague urgency is different.
Vague urgency feels different. It often appears late in the day. It's usually undefined, just we need to talk, or this is a priority. But the most damning characteristic, according to the source, is that it seems to exist because a boundary is present.
That's the part that really caught my attention, the idea that the request isn't happening despite you leaving. It's happening because you're leaving.
It's a test. The author argues that the subtext of these messages isn't, is this work critical? The subtext is, will you bend?
And that just shifts the entire dynamic. If the subtext is, will you bend, then the work itself is almost secondary.
It is. It becomes a power dynamic.
A test of availability and compliance.
It is. And this connects right back to the title, the stress test. In engineering, you stress test a material not to see if it's pretty, but to see where it breaks. You want to know its failure point. When a manager sends that vague late-night request, they're effectively stress testing the employee's boundary.
And the result of that test tells you everything about the default of the system. The essay creates this binary that I found really helpful for, self-diagnosis. It compares the healthy response to the unhealthy response.
Let's start with the healthy default. The author defines this very simply. In a healthy system, the mechanism for dealing with pressure is trade-offs.
Which sounds like basic logic, but what does that look like in practice?
So imagine that legitimate urgency hits. The deadline is moved up or a resource is lost. In a healthy team, the leadership looks at the constraints and they ask, what do we drop?
Okay.
What is the smallest acceptable outcome? Who owns this while you're away?
They act as a filter.
They act as a sophisticated switchboard. They realize that if the pressure increases, the plan has to change to accommodate it. The variable that shifts is the plan.
The plan changes so the person doesn't have to.
That is the quote. And it's just profound in its simplicity. The system absorbs the shock by adjusting its parameters, the scope, the timeline, the quality level.
But we know that often that is not what happens.
No. In the unhealthy default, the mechanism is rigidity.
Rigidity.
The plan is treated as sacred. The deadline cannot move. The scope cannot be reduced. The client cannot be told no. The system basically refuses to absorb the shock.
So if the plan is rigid and the pressure is real, where does the shock go?
It goes to the human. If the plan can't flex, the person must. The employee becomes the shock absorber. The author writes, boundaries become negotiable and urgency becomes a tool.
That's a critical distinction. In one model, we negotiate the work. In the other, we negotiate the person.
And this is where it gets tricky for the listener, I think, because if you are in that unhealthy system, it rarely feels like some hostile negotiation. Your boss doesn't usually come in and say, I don't care about your mental health, work harder.
No, it's usually much friendlier than that.
It's seductive. And this brings us to the section on the weaponization of virtue. This was, for me, the most insightful part of the essay.
Weaponized virtue. That sounds paradoxical.
It does. But think about the language used in these moments of pressure. We need extreme ownership here. We need you to be a team player. We grind until the job is done.
The company pays for results.
Right. And it's hard to argue with those statements. I mean, I want to be a team player. I believe in ownership. If I push back against that, I sound like I'm lazy or difficult.
That is exactly the trap. The author notes that these terms are not inherently bad. In a healthy context, ownership is great. But in an unhealthy system, these virtues are used as leverage.
Leverage.
They are used to pry open your boundaries.
So ownership becomes code for you deal with the mess we created.
Exactly. And team player becomes code for don't complain about the lack of resources. The source points out that this tactic hits a specific type of person the hardest. It targets the conscientious.
The high performers, the people who care. If you're disengaged, if you don't care about your reputation, these guilt trips just bounce right off you. You just say no and go home.
Sure.
But if your identity is tied to being reliable, to being the go-to person, this language is like a key that unlocks your defenses. You say yes because you want to be that virtuous person.
And what is the cost of that yes?
Right.
Because the essay talks about a cumulative effect. It's not just the lost Friday evening.
No, the cost is much deeper. It creates what the author calls background stress. Even if you do the work, even if you finish the task and everything is fine, the mental toll remains.
It's the vigilance, right?
It's hypervigilance. You start replaying conversations in your head. Did I sound weak when I asked if it could wait? Are they judging my commitment? You are constantly scanning the horizon for the next request.
You never truly disconnect.
You never do, because you know that your off switch is conditional. It can be flipped back on by someone else at any moment.
That state of being on call, psychologically, even when you aren't being paid to be on call. I mean, that's a one-way ticket to burnout.
And that explains the quiet quitting or the sudden departure. The author argues that eventually these high ownership people leave, and they don't leave because the work was too hard. They leave because the environment turned every single boundary into a negotiation.
It's just exhausting, having to litigate your right to rest every single week.
It's unsustainable. And it forces us to look at the leadership side of this equation. Because if you're the manager sending these emails, you probably don't think of yourself as a villain.
I would guess most managers doing this are just stressed themselves.
Correct. And that leads to the diagnostic section of the essay. The author pivots here from observation to a sort of philosophical framework for evaluating leadership.
There are two lines here that the author holds on to as a diagnostic tool. The first one is, boundaries reveal whether someone is leading or controlling.
Let's unpack that. Leading implies navigating a path. If a leader hits a boundary, like an employee's vacation, they navigate around it. They solve for it. Right. Controlling implies forcing a path. If a controller hits a boundary, they try to dismantle it.
It changes the definition of the boundary. For a leader, a boundary is a fixed constraint, like a wall. For a controller, it's a suggestion.
Or an obstacle to be overcome, which leads to the second diagnostic line, which I think is the most powerful sentence in the entire piece.
Okay.
The clearest sign of fragile authority is when it turns your boundaries into leverage.
Fragile authority. That's an interesting choice of words. Why fragile? Why not toxic or aggressive?
Well, fragile implies instability. If I, as a leader, have to rely on guilt-tripping you or questioning your loyalty or invading your personal time just to get the basic work done, my system is broken.
My authority is weak.
My authority is weak. I haven't built a robust machine. I'm just relying on your good nature to patch over the holes in my planning.
That connects to the idea mentioned in the source, that urgency is often just anxiety transfer.
Yes. This is a crucial realization for anyone on the receiving end of this pressure. Often the urgency you feel coming from your boss isn't about the task. It's about their internal state. They are anxious.
They feel out of control.
Exactly. And the only way they know how to self-soothe is to make you anxious too. If they can make you jump, they feel a little bit of control returning.
So the quick request is actually a coping mechanism for the leader.
It is. The source makes a strong claim here. Real urgency can usually be explained clearly.
The server is down. We're losing $10,000 an hour.
That's clear. That's real. But if the urgency is justified by vague statements, appeals to loyalty, or just a general sense of panic, it's rarely about the work.
It's about the emotional climate of the leadership. It really reframes the whole experience. Instead of feeling guilty that you aren't doing enough, you start to see the structural cracks in the leadership above you.
And that brings us right back to the core premise, defaults. Under pressure, the leader's default is revealed. Do they default to problem solving and trade-offs? Or do they default to emotional transfer and boundary violation?
The essay wraps up with a synthesis of all this. It moves away from the specific Friday night email and looks at the design of work itself. The closing thought is, pressure is inevitable. What we do with it is the design.
I like that the author doesn't promise a world without pressure. That would be naive. We work in competitive fields, things break, deadlines are tight.
Pressure is a constant.
It's a constant physical law of the workplace. But the design is how we metabolize that pressure.
Metabolize is a good word for it.
Does the system process the pressure and distribute it safely? Or does it let the pressure build up until it ruptures the people inside? That's a design choice. It's not an accident.
It suggests that burnout isn't usually a personal failure of resilience. It's a systemic failure of design.
Precisely. If you build a bridge that collapses every time a heavy truck drives over it, you don't blame the truck. You blame the engineer. But in the workplace, when a person collapses under load, we tend to blame the person.
We say they couldn't hack it.
Exactly. This essay challenges us to look at the bridge.
So for the listener who's been nodding along to this, maybe feeling a little seen or maybe a little exposed if they're a manager, where does this leave us? The essay is reflective, not prescriptive, but there are implications.
I think the implication is awareness. The next time that quick request comes in, or the next time you feel the urge to send it, just pause.
Treat it as data.
Treat it as data. Look at the mechanism. Ask yourself, is this legitimate urgency? Is the house on fire? Or is this a stress test?
Am I asking because the work needs to be done, or am I asking because I need to see if this person is still under my control?
And if you're the one receiving it, you have to realize that your reaction, your yes or your no, is also teaching the system how to treat you.
That's the hard truth. If you always bend, the system learns that you're flexible, and it will keep bending you until you break.
It's a heavy topic, but I think a necessary one. We often focus so much on the productivity tools and the output that we forget the human operating system running underneath it all.
And that system has defaults. It's worth knowing what they are before the pressure hits.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for walking through this deep dive with me. It was a quieter one, but I think it's going to stick with me the next time my phone buzzes at 6:00 p.m. And to our listeners, thank you for trusting us with your time. We'll see you in the next deep dive. Take care.